I could never have imagined that my life would change forever with a knock on the door. That morning, everything seemed ordinary, or so I thought. But the woman at the door would make me realize that the marriage I had trusted for years was actually built on a lie. The words she spoke, exposing my wife Jane's infidelity, shattered everything inside me. Infidelity. That morning, the words I heard from a stranger's mouth revealed not just an affair, but a truth that would turn my entire life upside down. If I had known what was about to unfold when that door knocked, perhaps I would never have opened it. I had always dreamed of becoming an architect. Since childhood, I had a great curiosity about how buildings were constructed. I would stare at buildings for hours, imagining how they rose into the sky. In high school, I set my goal and decided to study architecture. After graduating from the University of Maryland, I started working at a prestigious architecture firm in Northern Virginia. In the beginning, it was tough. I lived modestly on a small salary and often stayed late at the office, but I never complained because I was fulfilling my dreams. My life was progressing exactly as I had planned. Then I met Jane. She worked in the university cafeteria, always rushing around. At first, she caught my eye just as a waitress, but then I realized that there was more to her. Jane was a single mother, raising her young daughter Joyce, all by herself. She struggled with the challenges of raising her daughter alone, while also working 2 jobs. Her strength and determination in life drew me closer to her. She wasn't just a beautiful woman, she was strong and independent. Her strength and determination made me feel better about myself in some way. Our first date almost got canceled due to financial difficulties. Jane couldn't even afford to go out to dinner, but I was determined to overcome this obstacle and offer her and her daughter a life they could rely on. I assured her that the struggles of her past were behind her and that together we could overcome anything. This assurance brought Jane closer to me. Over time, our bond deepened. Jane's small family became mine as well. Joyce eventually started calling me Dad, and hearing that word from her made me feel like we were truly a family. Each day we grew closer, nurturing our hopes for the future together. A few months later, when I proposed to her, I experienced one of the happiest moments of my life. There was deep joy within me, but I couldn't foresee the dark days that lay ahead. We moved to Northern Virginia, and my career began to soar. Everything in my marriage with Jane seemed perfect, or so I thought. However, as the years went by, Jane was no longer content just looking after the children. Her desire to stand on her own 2 feet grew. She entered the real estate business and became a successful realtor. Her career was advancing quickly. At first, I was proud of her achievements. I supported her, doing everything I could to help her succeed. But with this success, the distance between us began to grow. Jane spent more time on her job and less time at home. She started coming home late. Her business trips became more frequent, and she always had a new excuse. At first, I didn't see this as a problem. After all, everyone goes through busy periods, right? But over time, our bond broke. Even when Jane was physically at home, she was mentally distant from me. Our conversations dwindled, and the moments we shared almost completely disappeared. In bed, the distance between us grew. Every night when she returned from her business trips, I noticed a sparkle in her eyes, a joy, that had nothing to do with me. Doubts began to form in my mind, but I didn't want to accept them. Could she really be betraying me? As the thought crossed my mind, I was afraid to confront her, because if it were true, I knew I didn't have the strength to handle it. I received the answer that morning. After dropping Jane off at the airport, I returned home to find a white SUV parked in front of my house, and an unfamiliar woman standing there. She introduced herself as Barbara. When Barbara told me that her husband was having an affair with Jane, my mind refused to accept this truth. Jane, my wife, the woman I had been with for years. How could such a betrayal be possible? What Barbara told me revealed the true face of Jane. She explained that for months, Jane and her husband, Leonard, had been secretly meeting in empty houses. To catch them, Barbara had placed cameras in a hotel room and recorded everything. As she showed me my wife's infidelity, my mind seemed to shut down. The images of Jane with another man in a hotel room turned my world upside down. At that moment, I realized that Jane had been deceiving me for years. Then my phone rang. Jane's voice was warm and loving as always. "Hi, darling, the conference is going great," she said. While watching her with another man, the ease in her voice horrified me. How could this be possible? How could she tell me such a huge lie? That day, in that moment, Jane died for me. The love I had for her faded away in the face of her betrayal. The life we had built for years was gone in an instant. When Jane returned home, all that awaited her were packed suitcases. Even the children had turned their backs on her. This betrayal shattered everything that had held our family together. I looked at Jane one last time. There was guilt in her eyes, but at that moment, it meant nothing to me. I didn't know what I felt for her anymore. Anger, disappointment, pain. But love? That was gone. She was alone now, and there was no turning back. As Jane picked up her suitcases and walked away from the house, the emptiness inside me grew. Everything I had believed in for years vanished in an instant. I watched her leave, and a single thought crossed my mind. You deserve this. At that moment, I felt like I had regained control of my life. Jane might never come back into my life again, but I would rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. Life goes on, and so would I. But this new life would no longer include her. As the door closed, an eerie silence fell over the house. With Jane's departure, a void formed, but strangely enough, that void brought a sense of relief. Everything was out in the open now, and the lies were over. It gave me a strange sense of peace. For a moment, I sat down and began to re-examine my entire life. I thought about the early days when I first met Jane, her smiling face, the dreams we had built together. These memories now felt distant and foreign to me, as if they had belonged to another life. When I learned of Jane's betrayal, all those beautiful memories suddenly crumbled into ruins, and now I found myself stuck amidst the debris. As time passed, I began to reorganize my life with the children. I tried to spend more time with Joyce and Richie. I could see how much they were struggling with the betrayal as well. Joyce, in particular, was finding it difficult to cope with her mother's infidelity. I tried to be there for her, but I was also wrestling with my own pain. One day, Joyce came to me with tears in her eyes and asked, "Dad, why did everything turn out like this?" At that moment, all the emotions I had been holding back surfaced. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said. "Sometimes the people we trust the most let us down, but that doesn't mean it's our fault." As I stroked her head, I tried to wipe away her tears. Seeing her so heartbroken only doubled my own pain. But as a father, I had to be strong for her and offer her the security she needed. Over time, Jane's absence became a fact of life for us. At first, it was difficult to adjust to this new reality. There was an undeniable void, but also a sense of peace. No longer were we living a life filled with lies. Jane's betrayal had left a large empty space, but gradually, that emptiness began to fill with a new order. I spent more time with the children, getting to know them better. Perhaps in this process, our family was growing stronger, even without Jane. Each passing day, Jane's presence faded more from my mind. The memories I once had with her now felt like distant shadows. Of course, there were times when the past resurfaced. A restaurant we had visited, a song we had shared, or even a simple object that reminded me of her. But those memories no longer hurt me the way they once did. They were simply remnants of a past I had chosen to leave behind. One day, the divorce papers from Jane arrived. I held the pen in my hand for a long time, staring at the blank space where my signature was supposed to go. This piece of paper was the official end of our life together, but it also symbolized a new beginning. I took a deep breath and signed it. In the end, I learned that life does move on without Jane. The pain of betrayal was immense, but over time, it lessened. I picked myself up and found a way to reconnect with life. This new chapter life had offered me was one I intended to fill with new memories, alongside my children.